Question 1. In what ways does your media product use, develop, or challenge forms and conventions of real media products? In order to make the titles relevant to the genre of horror, I used a glow effect to create a ghostly effect. I used white as the colour for the text to contrast with the black background. I also researched the titles for other horror films to find conventions for the genre and found that this was a common colour for the text. As you can see from the title for horror, Alien, I have used this screen capture to show the similarities between these titles and my own. For example, the text colour and the font type are very similar. I used a plain, bold sans serif font which appears steadfast and strong on the page. Setting and location. I chose to film in the late afternoon so that the lighting was low, as this is a common feature of horror films. As you can see from the image, there are trees in the surrounding area which, in the low light, appear creepy, which set the atmosphere for my sequence. The surrounding area is very empty. I chose a large factory as my location, which has a very large empty surrounding area, which I feel adds to the eerie tone. This idea of an isolated area for a horror film was a convention that I found very popular. The idea that the characters are in the middle of nowhere adds to the creepiness of the opening sequence. Costumes and props. I chose to use a pillow and a sleeping bag as props to demonstrate that the characters are staying the night at the factory location, a typical scenario for a horror film, with two young vulnerable girls staying alone in an empty factory. The actors are wearing normal, everyday clothes as I wanted them to look ordinary teenagers to ensure that the target audience for my opening sequence can easily relate to the characters. Camera work and editing. I tried to use a varied range of shot types and camera angles. Here I have used this close-up to show both the inquisitive expression on the character Emily's face as she leaves the room and investigates the noise, and also to show the character Sophie in the background, who looks concerned for Emily. I wanted to make clear that Sophie was staying behind as she is portrayed as a less daring, more worried character. The storyline consists of two 16-year-old girls who stay in an empty factory overnight as a bet. They hear a noise after setting up a bed for the night, and Emily, the braver of the two, goes upstairs to investigate. After Emily doesn't return, Sophie begins to worry and goes after her. She hears Emily scream "help" and begins to shout her name with no reply. I have used this screen capture as it shows the introduction of the story. The two girls have just set up for the night. This is demonstrated by the sleeping bag and pillow. I have also used a clip to demonstrate when Sophie shouts for her friend, as this shows the audience that she has gone missing. I have used, as you can see from this screen capture, a location which is very large with little in the surrounding area. This gives the impression that the factory the characters are staying in is in the middle of nowhere. This is typical of the horror genre, as it creates a sense of isolation around the characters, which adds to the creepiness and can be unnerving. You can also see from this screen capture that I have used low lighting by filming in the late afternoon. This is another convention for the horror genre, as the poor visibility from low lighting can add to the eerie tone and can emphasise suspense. An example of this is the opening sequence of A Nightmare on Elm Street, where a man appears to be crafting tools in a very low-lit room. The two main characters are immediately introduced. I use two female teenagers as they appear vulnerable. As you can see from this still, the character Emily, who is on the left, is portrayed as the braver of the two characters, which is demonstrated by her unlocking the doors, as the more wary character, Sophie, appears nervous and stood back slightly. This idea of one of the characters being braver and pushing the story onwards, I've found when looking at other horror opening sequences, such as The Ring, where one of the characters goes down to investigate a noise that she hears.